In this example, we're going to look at how sometimes it's helpful to simplify or just rewrite terms before we differentiate them. Okay, in part A we have f of x equals 6 root x minus 5 over x to the power 4. To differentiate this, it first helps to prepare the terms for differentiation. So I want to take each term and write it as x to a power. Starting with the first term, I have 6 root x. I can write that as 6x to the power of 1/2. For minus 5 over x to the 4, I can write it as minus 5, and then the x to the 4 on the bottom of the fraction can be written as x to the negative 4. Now that we have each term in the form x to the power of something, we can differentiate using the standard rules. So we're finding f dash of x. For the first term, we multiply by the power. 6 times 1/2 is 3. And then subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the negative 1/2. For the second term, it's negative to start off with, but then I'm timesing by negative 4, which means I get positive 20. Subtracting 1 from the power gives x to the negative 5. If you're doing a question where you decide to prepare the terms before you do the differentiation, make sure on your first line you're not writing f dash of x or dy dx. Here I've got f of x for the first line because I haven't differentiated yet. So I'm just going to annotate these. So the first line was preparing to differentiate. And then the second line, where I have f dash of x, is where I actually differentiate. A common mistake I see students make is that on this first line they straight away write f dash x and then they write something where they haven't actually differentiated. Let's take a look at part B. Once again, we need to prepare it for differentiation first. Let's look at how to deal with this first term. We have x on its own. For the purposes of tidying this up, we might want to think of this as x to the power of 1. And then the root x is x to the power of 1/2. And so if we're doing x to the power of 1 multiplied by x to the power of 1/2, we need to add those powers. And that gives us 2x to the power of 3 over 2. For the second term, we've got minus 8 over the cube root of x. The cube root of x can be written as x to the third. So we get minus 8x. Because it's on the bottom of the fraction, it will be negative 1/3. For the third term, 2 over 3 root x, we have to be careful with how we deal with the fraction and where things end up. So as the 2 is on the top of the fraction, we're going to leave that on the top of the fraction. And here the 3 is on the bottom of the fraction, so I'm going to leave that on the bottom of the fraction. So that just becomes 2/3. But the x, I want to write as x to the power of something. As it's on the bottom of the fraction, I can write it as x to the power of negative 1. The thing to be careful of is that you don't also bring the 3 up, because if you wanted to move that 3 onto the top of the fraction, it would have to become 3 to the negative 1 as well. But in this case, it's easier to leave it on the bottom. Now that we've prepared our terms, we can differentiate. Multiplying 2 by 3 over 2 gives us 3, and then subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the power of 1/2. For the second term, it's negative to start off with, but we're going to multiply by negative 1/3. That gives us positive 8/3. Subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the negative 4/3. For the third term, multiplied by the power gives us negative 2/3, and then subtracting 1 from the power gives x to the negative 2. Okay, here's a couple of questions for you to have a go at for yourself then. Pause the video and then come back and check your solutions against mine. Welcome back, here are my solutions. Well done if you got them right. If not, I'm going to go through how I got my solutions now. In part A, we first need to rewrite the terms as x to the power of something. So we have y equals, and then the cube root of x can be written as x to the power of 1/3. And negative 2 over x can be written as negative 2x to the negative 1. Then we differentiate. Multiplying by the power gives us 1/3 out the front, and then subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the negative 2/3. For the second term, Multiplying by the power -1 gives us +2, and then subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the -2. In part B, we need to do something similar. We'll start by simplifying the terms into a form that we can work with. 4 over root x can be written as 4x to the -1/2. To deal with the second term, we've got x squared multiplied by x to the power of 1/2. And if we add the powers, we get 2.5, which can be written as 5 over 2. So x to the power 5 over 2. For the third term, we've got a 7 on the numerator, a 3 on the denominator, so we can write that as 7/3. To deal with the x's, think of this as x to the power of 1, and on the bottom, x to the power of 1/2. To divide them, we subtract the powers, so we do 1 subtract 1/2, which gives us x to the power of 1/2. Next we differentiate, so we've got f' of x. Multiplying by the power, 4 times -1/2 gives us -2, and then subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the -3 over 2. For the next term, multiplying by the power gives us -5 over 2 out the front. Subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the 3 over 2. For the third term, 7/3 times 1/2 gives us +7/6. And then subtracting 1 from the power gives us x to the power of -1/2.